Hello and welcome back to the channel where once again it's time for another first impressions video in my PlayStation series, with today's game being the 6th game in the series, and it's another first person shooter known as Delta Force Urban Warfare, a 2002 game that first came out in July in North America and then over here in the PAL region in August. It's worth pointing out that it was the first game in the Delta Force series to appear on a PlayStation console.
Positions and stand by to complete.
Copy that, John. You sound like you're in a hurry.
Let's just say, this is not my favorite thing.
So the story for Urban Warfare revolves around a Delta Force operative named John Carter, who'd been a part of a failed drug bust in Colombia which went terribly wrong, and then he's subsequently sent undercover by CIA agent Robert Jackson in an attempt to capture or kill the involved drug lord and red mercury smuggler known as Malik.
John, how about giving us some orders?
Now I have to be honest, because the introduction for the game completely blew me away, because I wasn't expecting a fully voiced introduction sequence using the in-game visuals. This was not something I'd expect from a 2002 PS1 game. Remember, it came out over 2 years after the PS2 had came out, and most PS1 games at this point in time had very little effort put into them, and this is a game that's genuinely had a fair amount of effort put into it, and you can tell, yes, the voice acting isn't perhaps the best, but the fact it's in there, the fact it's had a lot of effort put into the introduction, sent me positive waves of encouragement for the game. Once you hit the main menu, you've got new game, load game, options and credits. When you go into options, you have got quite a lot of things under controls and game configuration that you'll actually want to look at, because the game's actually got quite an in-depth control scheme, and you'll want to really look at all of these options because you may want to tweak them for yourself and for your preference in terms of gameplay. Video and audio options are very, very limited. So like always, I'm going to start with visuals first, and we're going to talk about the positive things because I actually think there are quite a few within Delta Force. The first thing that struck me was the game has somewhat of a Metal Gear Solid and GoldenEye style of presentation to it, and it actually pleasantly surprised me. The radar in the top corner is very similar to Metal Gear Solid, and the actual graphical style within the game kind of combines elements of GoldenEye and Metal Gear Solid together, and it's actually pretty decent, and that's not something you'd necessarily say about many games that were coming out in the PlayStation's very final years, because a lot of them were just cash-ins. They were very lazily made and they weren't particularly good in any way. So Delta Force is actually quite an obscurity in that regard. The character models within the game look reasonably good, and the locations are relatively well detailed, and there's actually quite a lot of variety within them too, because you'll be gunning down bad guys in office buildings, banks, and even on board a ship. And it's easy to tell that it's come later in the PlayStation's life, because a lot of the earlier shooters on the system, Doom and Life Force Tenka that we've taken a look at previously, are relatively samey when it comes to the locations that you're exploring. We've even got missions that take place at night time where you need to use your night vision goggles too, so there really is a decent amount of variety within this game, certainly that I've experienced so far, at least anyway. Now, before you think I'm hailing this as one of the very best looking games on the PlayStation, I'm not, because there are some niggles with it. Primarily things like texture warping, which is quite obvious in certain areas. We've also got enemies glitching through doors when they open. Rather than them needing to walk around them, they can simply teleport through them. Of course, this is a little bit irritating. And of course, the game doesn't have the best of frame rates. It is nowhere near a consistent 30 frames per second, for example. It is relatively choppy and slows down in areas, but on the whole, for a 2002 PlayStation game, it's actually relatively good looking. So So moving on to the sound effects and music next, and it's more positive things here as well, because I feel Delta Force performs really strongly across the board, whether we're talking about all of the sound effects for the weapons and the fact they're thoroughly satisfying and realistic in the way they sound, or all of the cries that enemies make when you gun them down. It genuinely does sound really good, and the music as well, it brings on suspense and intensity at exactly the right moments. It kicks in as you progress through the levels when enemies are about to see you and stuff. It works very, very well overall. The only downside really in this area is, of course, the voice acting just feels that little bit lifeless, like the actors aren't emotionally connected to the characters that they're portraying. But of course, that's only a minor gripe, so what I'll do is what I always do and give you some samples of the music within the game. So moving on to the gameplay next, and the main flow of the game is a mission-based system where you're given orders at the start of the level and you simply have to try and complete them. Most of the levels that I've experienced so far are relatively linear, and the ones that are slightly larger do actually have a little bit of loading from one section to another, but it's nothing terrible. In terms of the control system, thankfully the dual analog controllers were the main form of controls for first-person shooters now, so we've got that system in place with the left analog stick moving you and then strafing, and the right analog stick aiming and looking up and down, and it works very well. In all fairness, the game controls pretty decently, and the game actually has quite a lot of depth to the controls because it uses pretty much every single button on the PlayStation controller, whether you're using items, getting the map up, detonating things, using your night vision, dodging or leaning right and left. There are a lot of things to do, and there's also button combinations to quickly throw knives, select weapons, silence through different modes for guns, semi-automatic bursting, attaching and detaching silencers. There is a lot of depth to the gameplay, and it actually functions really well in my opinion, and it's actually a good playing game. It's not one of these older first-person shooters where you simply need to get key cards to unlock every single door. There's different things to do through the levels, and it keeps it varied. It's enjoyable, and I actually think it's a good playing game. It plays far better than I'd expect it to, with it being a later game on the PlayStation. I really do think it's quite a good playing game. We've also got plenty of storyline sequences between all the levels as well, and this is nice because it ties everything together. It keeps the story flowing nicely, and again, this is something I just wouldn't have expected for a later PlayStation 1 game. Now, it doesn't mean the game is perfect. My major gripe really with the gameplay is the difficulty, because as soon as you get past that first mission and you're on the sniper level, it's basically impossible. I'm not going to lie. You will die and die and die on that level, because as soon as you sniper one of the enemies, all of the other enemies are then shooting you, and I couldn't get past it without turning on invincibility. And actually, I left invincibility on for quite a lot of the game, and it just made the game much more enjoyable overall. I felt just being able to play through it without having to worry about dying and dying and dying and replaying levels and missions over and over again. This is the kind of game that I just want to play through once, see the story, see the ending, and then finish it. So moving on to content and lifespan next, and what we've got with Delta Force is 12 missions spread across a variety of different locations, meaning there is quite a bit of variety, and it will take around about 3 to 4 hours to play through if my research is correct, and I think it is, because I played it for around about 90 minutes for this video, and I think I'm about halfway through the game already. And to be fair, I think that's exactly the right duration of time for this game to be. You can play through it in about a weekend and just enjoy it for what it is. It doesn't have a 2-player mode, so it's not got any replay value in that regard. But what it does have is quite a lot of content, quite a lot of weapons, quite a lot of controls and in-depth mechanics, much more so than I'd have expected for a game that's come out on the PlayStation well after the PlayStation 2's release. In fact, if you just flick through the instruction manual, you realize how much effort has actually gone into this game, and it is actually a fair surprise in all fairness. So I think overall, in terms of content and lifespan, the game actually performs pretty well. So like always, that leaves me with my two final questions. Is Delta Force Urban Warfare a game I'm going to come back to and play more of and potentially complete? And what final grade is it going to get based on its first impressions? Well, I'm going to say this. I definitely think I will finish this game off, but I will probably leave the invincibility cheat on just to complete the game. Some people will say, what's the point in playing it? Well, I play games just for the enjoyment factor now and not necessarily the frustration of dying over and over again, especially when it's a game like this, when you feel like you die quite a lot. It's quite difficult. Sometimes when you're shooting enemies as well, they don't actually seem to take any damage, so it has got a few niggles, and just playing it with the invincibility on takes those away and just makes it much more enjoyable in my opinion. Now, in terms of a final grade, it's very difficult. I gave Life Force Tenka a C a few weeks back, but I think overall Delta Force is actually slightly better than that. So I'm going to give it a relatively healthy C+, because I feel it looks relatively decent, it sounds relatively decent, and it actually plays really well. So a C+ is what Delta Force gets, meaning it's one of the better PlayStation games that we've actually looked at so far in the series, with Ridge Racer Type 4 being the best one so far with a B+ grade. But of course, these are just my thoughts and my thoughts alone, and I would be interested in knowing if anybody out there has actually played this game, because obviously when it came out, most people would have moved on to other consoles, so it would be interesting to know if anybody watching the video when I put it out has actually played it. So of course, let me know your thoughts down below on Delta Force Urban Warfare, and like always, I'll be back in the near future with another video. Goodbye for now.
Before Glasnost put a stop to it, but they were well on their way to succeeding.
And now you're worried it's all about to resurface?
Yes, with the help of an ex-Soviet general by the name of Emil Malik.